Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Attracted by the beauty and fortune of Rukmini, the daughter of King Bhishmaka, many great princes and kings assembled to marry her. But Lord Krishna, stepping over the other hopeful candidates, carried away as his own share, as Garuda carried away nectar. Purport. Princess Rukmini, the daughter of King Bhishmaka, was actually attractive as fortune itself, because she was as valuable as gold, both in color and in value. Since the gold goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, is the property of the Supreme Lord, Rukmini was actually meant for Lord Krishna. But Shishupal was selected as a bridegroom by Rukmini's elder brother. Although King Bhishmaka wanted his daughter to be married to Krishna, Rukmini invited Krishna to take her away from the clutches of Shishupal. So when the bridegroom, Shishupal, came there with his party, with a desire to marry Rukmini, Krishna all of a sudden swept her from the scene, stepping over the heads of all the princes there, just as Garuda carried away nectar from the hands of the demons. That's a long sentence. This incident will be clearly explained in the 10th canto. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthavute Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskadyade Siddharane. Generally speaking, we find pastimes of Krishna in the 10th canto. As a matter of fact, these are summaries of Krishna's pastimes in the 10th canto. And as we know, there are different parts of the Bhagavatam meant for different classes of devotees. For instance, in the 2nd canto, it is mentioned that unless one becomes free from sex desire, one should not go beyond the lotus feet of Krishna, of which the 1st and 2nd cantos represent his lotus feet. And the 10th canto is meant for the Paramahamsas, those who are actually in the platform of Prema Bhakti or Bhava Bhakti. And the 10th canto is considered Krishna's smiling face. So we start with the 1st and 2nd canto, his lotus feet and his ankles, and we progress upward until we come to the 10th canto, which is his smiling face. Now the question is that why did Krishna put, or actually Vyasadeva, or whoever it is, put in the 3rd canto of Bhagavatam a summary of Krishna's pastimes? Why did Srila Prabhupada write the Krishna book, which is a summary of the 10th canto? So Prabhupada explains that in the introduction that, well, we haven't even started the class. We're already taking rest. He explains that there are 3 classes of people who appreciate this Krishna book. One class are those who are materialists, another is those who are working on the platform of liberation, and the third is those who are actually liberated. They'll all benefit from hearing these activities of Krishna in the 10th canto. The materialistic devotee, they'll benefit because to them it'll appear that these pastimes are just like the activities of a young boy and a young girl. And naturally, conditioned soul means that one will be attracted by activities between young boys and young girls. At least a normal conditioned soul. At least what used to be considered normal. Kali Yuga is not normal. People, under the modes of ignorance, one becomes even lower than the animals. There are very few homosexual animals. So therefore one goes even lower than the mode of ignorance, or the lowest modes of ignorance, one becomes even less than the animals. In any case, those who are what the Bhagavatam we would consider normal human beings, but materialistic, interested in sense gratification to some degree or another, that they'll find this 10th canto attractive because it appears to be the description between a young boy and a young girl, young girls. But if they hear from the right source, with the right attitude, then they'll actually be benefited by hearing about it. The right source means someone who actually understands what is the nature of Krishna's activities, and if one is submissive and puts aside one's materialistic conceptions, then one may be able to be benefited by hearing the Krishna book. Because at least one should understand who God is. The whole world is more or less become very degraded, in spite of the fact that there are so-called religions. Actually, religious principles begin, as it says in the first canto, with austerity, mercy, truthfulness, and cleanliness. But religion is destroyed, first of all, when one kills the bull and the cow, or harms them. So, what religion in this world nowadays emphasizes the protection of the cow and the bull. And as soon as the cow and bull are killed, then all the other principles will be broken also. Therefore, in Prabhupada's dialogues with other so-called religions, or religions, Prabhupada would always emphasize, for instance, in Christianity, Jesus Christ said that thou shalt not kill, and yet they become very expert at killing, especially the animals, and even some so-called religions are expert even killing their children and old people now. So the basic principle of religion is protection of the cow and the bull. If one is not following that principle, then it'll be very, very difficult to follow any other principle or to understand anything of a spiritual nature. Nivritti tarshara upagamanas bhavoshadas chotra manobhiramat kautam rashloka gunanuvardat vina pashugnat. Pashugnat. Actually, maybe that verse is even at the beginning of this. It's usually at the beginning of every. No. It's the beginning of the 10th. It's all right. I just got a couple of words left out in there, last line. That this knowledge comes down into simple succession. Nivritte tarshya upagima pavosajas chotami. And it's medicine for the contaminated minds of the living entities. They can purify it by hearing this philosophy and these pastimes of Krishna, especially the 10th canto. Ka-uttama shloka, that these are the topmost sound vibrations that one can hear. Vina pashugnat, except everyone will be able to appreciate it, except for those who are animal killers, or those who are killing oneself. So one who's killing animals will definitely be in the bodily concept of life. And all the other sinful activities will follow, which will put one even more into the bodily concept of life. Therefore, those who are eligible to hear even the 10th canto are not animal killers. Those who are following the principles of religion, although they may be materialistic, at least there is a tendency to try to act piously, which hearing about Krishna is the most pious activity. Of course, the Bhagavatam may act even on those who are less than pious and give them some piety, so that eventually they may become inspired to actually follow the principles of religion, so they can actually begin to understand what Krishna consciousness is all about. The second class of people are those who are aspiring for liberation. So if they hear with attention from the right source also, then they'll be able to obtain liberation by hearing these pastimes. If they learn how to hear them. And those who are on this transcendental platform, then they're actually relishing the pastimes because they're experiencing them directly. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Machchita machkata prana, bodhyantas parashparam, gatayantas from nityam, tushanti cha ramanti cha. That the thoughts of my pure devotees, they dwell in me. So that's our whole business, is to get people to think about Krishna. That's why we're giving classes. That's our whole purpose of the movement, is just to get people to think about Krishna, to hear about him, so eventually they can practice Krishna consciousness and think about him. Therefore Krishna says, Manmana Bhava Madbhakto, that if one hears about Krishna in the right way, from the right source, then one will become Krishna's devotee. One will become Krishna's devotee. Otherwise, it's not possible to become Krishna's devotee unless one hears about Krishna from the right source with the right attitude. Then when one comes to the platform of liberation by hearing, or acting on the platform of liberation, one may come to the platform of liberation. Afterwards, the hearing and chanting about Krishna becomes relishable. In order to do that, we have to hear a philosophy. Yet machchita machkata prana. How to utilize, where to put our consciousness, and how to utilize our prana. Chitta is consciousness, and prana is our life energy. How to engage prana, devotional service, so that our chitta, our consciousness becomes, we can actually hear about Krishna properly. And according to the level that we're working on, either there's tushanti, when there's enlightenment and purification of the heart from the contamination of the modes of material nature, and some pleasure from hearing about Krishna. And on the other hand, when one's heart is cleansed and one hears about Krishna, then there's ramanti, there's ecstasy, there's transcendental pleasure and continuous development of one's consciousness eternally. Therefore, one should go on at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, Nigama kalpatura galitam balam sukhamukam drava samyutam pibata amritam amalam mahur mahu bhavika bhavikaha. This Srimad Bhagavatam is just like a transcendental desire tree, and it was given from the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami, that one should go on hearing it even after liberation. In other words, our first business is to get out of the Bali concept of life. Therefore, initiation is primarily to agree to give up our false ego, that I am this body, and be willing to follow the rules and regulations given by Krishna and his representatives to become liberated from the Bali concept of life. Liberation from the Bali concept of life for a devotee means to be liberated into the spiritual conception of life. That I am dasa dasa anudasa, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I am the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. That's my only identity. I have no other identity. And when one is liberated on that platform, then when one hears, for instance, this pastime, one hears the name Rukmini, one will actually remember Rukmini. And Rukmini is a goddess of fortune, and therefore in association with the goddess of fortune, one becomes full of transcendental happiness and pleasure. If we hear this pastime and it has no effect on us, that means we shouldn't be hearing pastimes, really. I mean, hearing pastimes is something called hearing, just like in this third canto, we're hearing these pastimes. No harm, because we're hearing them sequentially. We're not trying to imagine that we're Rukmini or that we're the goddess of fortune, because we don't know who we are. We may be a blade of grass for all we know. So we're not trying to put ourselves in Rukmini's place. Probably easier to put ourselves in Shishupal's place. So we're not trying to do that, but we should try to imagine what's going on here. It is not that we should passively hear this, and at the end of class we walk away and we don't remember anything. We think, what was that all about? Why did they put this in the third canto? Something about, Krishna is fighting with these soldiers over some woman. Why did they put that in this third canto? And now they're telling me I should hear philosophy. Now, why is it there? Because perhaps we've gone through the second canto. Hopefully people have become somewhat free from the bodily concept of life. And they may be wondering, what is this Srimad Bhagavatam all about? So some summary is given there, in case one doesn't make it up to the fourth canto or the 10th canto. Then one has some idea of what we're talking about. Some idea who Krishna is and what he does. We don't have to wait till the 10th canto, because people may not wait till the 10th canto. They may skip to the 10th canto. So a little bit of encouragement is given in the third canto, so we can understand something about Krishna. Now when we read this, since we're trying not to be just materialists, hearing these pastimes and thinking it's nice pastime between young girls and young boys, or between a prince and a princess, since we're not trying to do like that, therefore we should learn how to hear these pastimes in such a way as it helps us advance towards liberation. And one way of doing this is to imagine what we're hearing. Because right now we're living in really an imagination. Everything we're looking at, we're imagining, according to our conditioned nature, what it is. We actually believe in this world there are men and women, and that there are animals, and there are demigods. We actually believe that. Now am I going to say there are no men and women, there are no animals? But they're not what we think they are, that's all. Just like there are cars and varieties of cars, but the driver is always different from the car. And therefore when we think that people are, for instance, Prabhupada gives the example, someone is driving a Mercedes-Benz in India, and someone else is driving a rickshaw. You know what a rickshaw is? So they're driving the rickshaw, and the Mercedes-Benz driver is saying, "Get out of the way, rickshaw." So he's saying the man is a rickshaw. But the man is not a rickshaw, he's driving the rickshaw. And neither is the man a Rolls Royce or Mercedes-Benz, he's simply driving it. So similarly, we're not this body, it's simply a car. But we're thinking there are men and women in this world, but actually they're cars, which we call men and women. But no one is a man, no one is a woman, no one is an animal, no one is a demigod. The actual person is the soul within the body. So we're saying things wrong. We're blind. But when we put on just like when we can't see things well, we put on glasses so we can see things better. Now no one says, why are you artificially putting on glasses? Why don't you just try to see with your own eyes? Because glasses will help us see better. So similarly, we have to see with the eyes of knowledge. That means we have to imagine things that we're not seeing. It's like we're imagining that everyone is actually a spiritual soul. but it's not exactly just imagination in the sense that people think imagination, we're concocting something that's unreal. But we're imagining things according to the Shastra, which is real. And therefore, by imagining things according to Shastra, by seeing through the eyes of Shastra, we can see with the eyes of knowledge. And therefore we can see that when the soul is in the body, it moves, it thinks, it does things, it's different from a dead body because of the presence of the soul. So we may not see the soul, but we can ascertain something about what the soul is like by seeing how it works within a body. Just like we may not see the sun in the morning when it comes up, but when the light comes into the room, we can understand the presence of the sun. Similarly, when we see the soul within a body, we can understand something about what the soul's like by its qualities and attributes that it manifests through a body, as opposed to a dead body. Similarly, when we hear about Rukmini, Princess Rukmini, the daughter of King Bhishmaka, we should try to imagine a princess. Now, it may not be a perfect imagination, but at least we're imagining through the eyes of Shastra, and it becomes alive, the pastime. As a matter of fact, the pastime is alive to those who are alive. As I said, when a self-realized person hears these pastimes, they're actually in the pastime. They're experiencing the pastime. So we should also try to experience the pastime, because these are spiritual sound vibrations. Otherwise, how can we say, again, we can read this passage a number of times, and we'll only get more information about it. Therefore, we should try to see some princess and how Krishna is kidnapping her, and the prince and Shishupal, and everything like that. And then our consciousness will become purified, because we're actually engaging ourselves in devotional service by hearing these pastimes, this philosophy, this Srimad Bhagavatam. Otherwise, if we sit here like a log, like a piece of wood, and we listen to the pastimes and say, what has this got to do with me? I'm not going to kidnap any princess. I'm not a princess. What's going on? What has this got to do with it? It's not even, the story, we're just hearing one verse, it's not even a good story. No, we actually have to engage our intelligence, so that our intelligence imagines in a sense, creates within our mind, within our heart, what's talked about here, which is going on eternally, transcendentally, so that we can actually get some experience of it. We may not get the full experience, but we'll get some experience according to whatever time we put into it, so that we become interested in hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Just like we learn how to chant Hare Krishna properly, with attention and actually devotion, believing that Radha and Krishna are actually present when we're chanting Hare Krishna, then the result is Krishna, when he sees our sincerity, will actually give us the intelligence to experience him. Similarly, if we learn how to read Srimad Bhagavatam, then Krishna will give us the intelligence how to experience Srimad Bhagavatam. Just as deity worship is supposed to be a relationship between the soul and the deity, not just a ritual. It's supposed to be a loving relationship between the soul and the deity. Both the pujari who's doing the arti and those who are singing are supposed to be developing a loving relationship with the deity, not some exercise, either waving a stick of incense or dancing around on the floor. No, it's supposed to be developing a relationship with the deities and with the devotees. Similarly, these other powerful processes of devotional service, such as service to the devotees, is supposed to be developing a relationship not only with the devotees, but with Krishna. Similarly, making the atmosphere spiritual. It's supposed to be so that we can welcome Krishna within our heart more easily, and his devotees. Therefore, in these Krishna's pastimes at Vrindavan, we should try to hear with attention and try to see some princess, Shishupal, Krishna. Then it actually becomes interesting. That means we are actually doing something. And it's only by doing something that Krishna reciprocates and reveals himself. As a matter of fact, if we think about Krishna, as explained here when we hear the word Krishna, if we see someone with a flute, or hear him, he's a prince, see him with a turban, or whatever description there is in the Nectar of Devotion or other books, see him with a peacock feather perhaps. I don't know if he has a peacock feather in Dwarka, but he's a blackish body, and he has princely garments on, and his lotus-petaled eyes. If we see like that, if we try to see like that, if we try to hear and then see, then Krishna is actually manifesting himself within our consciousness. It is not that we're manifesting Krishna within our consciousness. It means that Krishna is revealing himself within our consciousness according to our desire to see him and experience him eventually. So this is we have to learn how to read Srimad Bhagavatam, which is what the first two cantos are meant for, and the rest of the cantos also bring us to higher levels of consciousness so that we can actually become qualified to experience Krishna just by hearing the 10th canto. Of course, we're not so qualified, most of us, I don't think, and therefore we don't stop after we read the 10th canto and go back to the spiritual world. Generally, we go back to the first canto to try to learn how to hear about Krishna's pastimes again. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Yes.
Can we say that ability to imagine or visualize pastimes or things which we read or hear is also a kind of realization?
Of course it's a realization. If we, of course, before we memorize or visualize pastimes, first we have to visualize forms. First we have to hear what's being said. So we don't hear Krishna's, with Rukmini, we imagine Krishna's dressed as a cowherd boy. We actually have to hear what's being said. Then the first thing to do is to try and visualize Krishna's form and his associates' forms. Then experience their qualities. What quality is being manifested here? And then their activities, how these qualities are being manifested here in their pastimes, in their lila. So there's a progression, either by chanting Hare Krishna, there's a progression, or by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam can be repeated again and again until we actually come to a platform. Even one verse can be repeated again and again until we get to a platform, for instance, a pastime verse, of actually experiencing it to some degree. One verse is sufficient to go back to Godhead. Or as Prabhupada said, even one word, if we hear it and properly. Then the whole idea is to actually become conscious of Krishna. We actually become conscious of Krishna, then our hearing is perfect. But of course, most of us are not going to spend time just reading one word. So therefore we go through all we go through the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, and hopefully we learn something about how to hear and chant and apply within our lives, so that as we go on progressively, it becomes clearer and clearer what is the actual process of taking advantage of Srimad Bhagavatam and realizing Krishna on every page of it. Yes? How to chant Hare Krishna properly? Well, you say Hare Krishna with complete surrender and devotion, and at once Krishna comes with his associates before you. That's properly. How to do it? One little step at a time. When we chant, generally speaking, we're distracted by so many thoughts. Have you ever had that experience? When you were chanting, some thoughts came that distracted you? Have you ever had that experience? So, what are those thoughts coming from? Only two things. Hankering from what we don't have and lamenting over what we lost. We meaning this body, or things in relationship to the body. So we have to utilize the energies that are within our influence and utilize them in Krishna service so that we identify those energies with Krishna rather than with ourselves, with this material conception that we have of ourselves. Then when we chant Hare Krishna, when the mind is cleared of all these misconceptions, and we actually accept that Krishna and His name are non-different, and we chant happily or lovingly or whatever else we may, with some affection, or attentively and with some affection to Krishna, then Krishna, He notices our sincerity and He reveals Himself accordingly. So that properly is a development of understanding and faith, and along with the revelation of Krishna, and then His giving us the intelligence first, and then His revealing Himself, so that the intelligence will allow us to know how to do things better, and when we apply that intelligence, try to do things better, then Krishna becomes pleased and gives us more intelligence, and reveals Himself more, so that things become realized. And when Krishna reveals to us by intelligence and by revelation how to chant Hare Krishna, then we can do it then we can do it with pure love, with prema bhakti. For now, when we're beginning, we're trying to do it, we're trying to chant free from the offenses. So we can study the offenses and see what they are, and see if I'm committing any of those offenses and how I could avoid them. So that's becoming more proper as time goes on. When we become free from the 10 offenses, then we'll come to the liberated platform. Then we can chant Shuddha Nam, pure name. And then after that, there'll be a reciprocation between our chanting and Krishna's revealing Himself to us. Anything else? Yes. I never heard that. No, by hearing these pastimes, maybe these anarthas will go away. But one can chant Hare Krishna one time with pure devotion, theoretically, and go back to the spiritual world. It never said that Ajamil heard these pastimes of Balaram killing the demons or Krishna killing the demons. No, one doesn't have to hear the past, but these pastimes help us become aware of some of these anarthas and take shelter of Krishna. Actually, it's not just hearing the pastimes, it's taking shelter of Krishna under these circumstances that some of these anarthas may go away. It's not just hearing the pastime and the anartha goes away. Otherwise, we've been hearing these pastimes for decades, and we still have the same anartha. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur expresses in his, I forget which book it is, that if one hears these pastimes, then some of these anarthas may go away. If you hear from in the right source, with the right consciousness, and the right understanding what these pastimes are all about, then we may, for instance, Putana, who disguised herself as Krishna's nurse, is a deceptive guru. So it's not just hearing about Putana, or of course if we see Krishna killing Putana, Putana is a representative of falsity, especially falsity of serving Krishna, coming to serve Krishna, but actually falsity. So therefore one can be aware of the fact that not everyone who comes to serve Krishna is equally qualified or equally honest. And therefore one may become free from the tendency of either becoming a false guru or accepting false gurus. But some understanding should be there. Otherwise, if one is only on the superficial level of hearing these pastimes, there's not really so much freedom from this kind of anartha, for instance. Anything else? Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.